A baby is staring at you, not glancing, not scanning the room and landing on your face by accident. Staring, locked on, unblinking. The kind of sustained visual contact that, between two adults, would either start a fight or start a relationship. But this is a 7-month-old across the coffee shop, and she has been drilling into your face for 15 seconds straight with the intensity of someone reading classified documents. You do what everyone does. You smile. She doesn't smile back. She just keeps looking. And something in your chest tightens that you can't quite name. Most people laugh this off. Call it cute. Wave. Make a noise. Move on. But neuroscientists who have spent 30 years mapping what happens inside both brains during those seconds have arrived at a conclusion that upends everything you think you know about that interaction. Because when that baby locked onto your face, she wasn't confused. She wasn't randomly fixating on the nearest interesting shape. She was initiating a neurobiological event that modern brain imaging has only recently been able to capture in real time. In 2017, a team at the University of Cambridge used functional near-infrared spectroscopy to measure neural activity in both infants and adults during face-to-face interaction. What they documented should have made international headlines. During mutual gaze, that exact moment a baby stares and you stare back, the electrical oscillations of the infant's brain begin to synchronize with the adult's. Same frequencies, same rhythms. Two separate brains, two separate skulls, firing in lockstep. That baby was not judging you. She was reaching for your neural signal with everything her developing brain had, and using it as the blueprint to build her own mind. And that tightness in your chest, that urge to look away, that sense of being read at a depth no adult has ever reached, that wasn't discomfort. That was your anterior cingulate cortex registering a signal it has no social framework for. A gaze carrying absolutely zero hidden agenda. In a world where every human look means something calculated, your brain received one that meant nothing except pure, unfiltered neural honesty. And it froze, because it had forgotten what that feels like. There was a time when you looked at the world the exact same way that baby just looked at you. No calculation behind the eyes. No running predictions about what the other person wanted, feared, or was about to take from you. In your first months of life, you stared at every face with the same surgical openness, the same total neural commitment. Your brain hadn't built the prediction engines yet. It hadn't learned that some smiles are performances, that some warmth is currency, and that most eye contact between adults is a negotiation, not a connection. But your nervous system is a learning machine with a single obsession: keeping you safe. And it learned fast. Every time someone's warmth disappeared without warning, every time a facial expression didn't match the words behind it, every time trust was extended and the return was pain, your temporoparietal junction cataloged it. Your amygdala adjusted its threat baseline upward. Your ventromedial prefrontal cortex recalibrated what safe meant, until the thresholds became so narrow that genuine connection became almost indistinguishable from potential danger. You didn't choose this. Your brain did the math while you were still too young to understand what was being calculated. Discrepancy by discrepancy, the armor went on. A subtle tightening around the eyes when a stranger gets too close. A half-second delay before smiling back, just long enough to scan for threat cues. A learned instinct to never be the last one holding eye contact. And then a baby stares at you. With none of that, no armor, no calculation. A gaze that predates every wall your nervous system ever built. And the reason it cuts through isn't because it's powerful, it's because it's ancient. It comes from before the operating system that runs your social brain was ever installed. That baby is looking at you from the same neurological place you used to live in. And the part of you that still remembers it can't look away without feeling something break. Your social brain processes roughly 40,000 micro-expressions per day. Every eyebrow lift, every jaw clench, Every pupil dilation gets routed through a network so fast, you form a judgment about someone's trustworthiness in less than 1/10 of a second. The temporoparietal junction models their intentions. The fusiform face area catalogs their identity. The amygdala runs a threat assessment that spikes your cortisol before you consciously register what you saw. This is the machinery you carry every day. Decades of optimization. Millions of social data points compressed into automatic computation. And then a baby stares at you, and every single one of those systems encounters something they were never trained on, a face that isn't performing anything. This is not a poetic observation. It is a measurable neurological event. In 2017, researchers at the University of Cambridge published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, documenting what happens inside both brains during that exact moment. Using functional near-infrared spectroscopy, they recorded neural oscillatory patterns simultaneously in infants and adults during face-to-face interaction. When a baby and an adult locked eyes, genuine mutual gaze, the electrical oscillation patterns of the infant's brain began synchronizing with the adult's. Same frequencies, same temporal rhythms. Two entirely separate nervous systems firing in coordinated patterns across the space between them. When the adult looked away, synchronization collapsed. When the gaze returned, it re-established. The coupling was strongest during mutual eye contact. A baby staring at you is not a passive act. It is a neurobiological handshake. The baby's brain is reaching across the gap between your skulls and locking its developing oscillatory architecture onto yours. Underneath this coupling lies a system even more ancient: mirror neurons, cells concentrated in the inferior frontal gyrus and inferior parietal lobule. Fire identically whether you perform an action or watch someone else perform it. They create a neurological bridge between self and other, a mechanism for understanding intention without language, for feeling what someone else feels without thinking about it. Between adults, this system runs through heavy filters. Social conditioning dampens it. Strategic self-presentation distorts it. But a baby's face has no curation. Every micro-expression is involuntary. Every emotional signal is unedited. When your mirror neurons lock onto a baby's face, they receive the purest possible input. Social data with no compression, no strategic noise, no embedded agenda. Your neural bridge connects to something completely unfiltered. That clarity is precisely what makes it feel overwhelming. The system goes deeper than neurons. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory maps the body's involuntary response to social engagement through the ventral vagal complex, a branch of the vagus nerve that regulates heart rate, breathing, and facial expression as an integrated social circuit. When a baby's gaze activates this system, the response is not a thought. It is physiological. Your pupils dilate. Your heart rate modulates. The muscles around your eyes soften. Your breathing shifts, all before your conscious mind registers that a baby is looking at you. Your body responds to the baby's signal at a level below awareness, because this is a subcortical conversation between two nervous systems that predates language by 100,000 years. Now place the metaphor where it belongs. A baby's gaze operates like a tuning fork pressed against crystal glass. The fork doesn't analyze the glass. It doesn't compute molecular structure or assess worth. It vibrates at a single, pure, unwavering frequency. And the glass either resonates or it doesn't. When that baby locked eyes with you, her brain was vibrating at its purest developmental frequency, unfiltered, uncomplicated, uncorrupted by the social operating system you've been running for decades. And your neural circuits, buried under layers of social conditioning, self-monitoring, and protective detachment, began to resonate. Not because you chose to, because the frequency was too pure to ignore. The glass doesn't decide to resonate. It can only respond to truth. What you felt in that moment, the tightening, the stillness, the strange gravity of being unable to look away, was not discomfort in the way you understand it. It was resonance, your deepest neural architecture, the parts that existed before social masks and strategic smiles, responding to a signal so clean, it bypassed every filter you've spent a lifetime installing. Your body knew before your mind did. Someone was seeing you without any of the rules. But here is where honesty demands a harder question. Because not everyone who flinches when a baby stares at them is running the same neurological program. Everything described so far, the oscillatory coupling, the mirror neuron activation, the ventral vagal engagement, represents a nervous system that is intact and responsive. Uncomfortable, yes. Overwhelming, possibly. But functional. The discomfort of resonance is proof that the system works. The tuning fork strikes, and the glass vibrates. That is the healthy response. That is what intact neural architecture sounds like when confronted with a signal it hasn't received in decades. But there is another response, and it looks almost identical from the outside. In 1975, Dr. Edward Tronick at Harvard designed the still face paradigm, an experiment so disturbing in its simplicity that it triggered years of ethical debate. A mother interacts normally with her infant, smiling, talking, responding. The baby is engaged, happy, staring up at her face with total neural commitment. Then, on cue, the mother goes blank. Still face. No expression. Eyes open, but nothing behind them. What happens in the next 90 seconds is one of the most studied sequences in all of developmental psychology. The baby tries to re-engage. Big smiles, pointing, vocalizing, everything that normally works. Nothing. The baby escalates. Bigger gestures, more urgent sounds. Still nothing. Within 90 seconds, cortisol spikes. Heart rate climbs. Some infants cry, others go flat. They mirror the mother's blankness, a vagal dorsal shutdown, the nervous system's last resort response when social engagement fails entirely, and the organism concludes that connection is no longer available. That experiment revealed something the field is still reckoning with. Babies are not passive recipients of care. They are active participants in a constant emotional negotiation conducted almost entirely through the face. The stare is the language. And when the language gets no response, the system doesn't just pause. It begins to rewire. Now flip the lens. That adult in the coffee shop who notices a baby staring and feels nothing, no tightness, no pull, no involuntary softening, might not be calm. They might be frozen. Not the freeze of discomfort, but the deeper freeze of a ventral vagal system that stopped expecting response a long time ago. Someone whose early relational architecture was shaped by faces that went blank too often, too early, learns something that no conscious therapy can easily override. That staring back is not safe. That the gaze will lead to nothing. That the tuning fork can strike, but the glass stopped vibrating years ago. This is not a judgment. It is a neural reality, and the difference matters. Because one response is resonance, evidence of an architecture that is intact, operational, capable of being reached. The other is silence, evidence of a system that learned to protect itself by disconnecting from the very signal it was designed to receive. Both feel like discomfort. Only one is actually feeling anything at all. So which one is yours? Before language existed, before the first stone tool was shaped, before any human being had ever built a fire or drawn a line on a cave wall, there was the stare. Two eyes locking onto two other eyes in the darkness. That was the first technology our species ever invented. Not the wheel, not agriculture. The gaze. The infants who could lock onto a caregiver's face and hold that neural coupling survived at dramatically higher rates. Not because staring is cute, but because staring is the mechanism through which a developing brain downloads the survival firmware it cannot build alone. An infant's prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, decision-making, emotional regulation, and every complex social behavior that defines adult cognition, arrives almost entirely unfinished at birth. It cannot wire itself in isolation. It requires an external neural template. It requires another brain's oscillatory patterns to calibrate against. It requires a face to stare at. Researchers at MIT's Department of Brain and Cognitive Sciences documented this with a precision that leaves no room for sentimentality. Infants who received more contingent face-to-face interaction in the first 6 months of life showed measurably greater cortical thickness in the prefrontal region. Not marginally, measurably. Every second of mutual gaze, every moment an adult holds a baby's stare and responds, is not bonding in the way greeting cards describe it. It is construction. Architectural, structural, neural construction of the hardware that will run another human's mind for their entire life. Now reconsider what happened in that coffee shop. That baby didn't randomly select your face from the visual noise of the room. Developmental selectivity studies from Harvard show that by 3 months, babies have enough visual range to look at anything in their environment, and they keep choosing faces. Not because faces are the brightest or the closest objects, but because faces are the signal the developing brain cannot survive without. Among all the stimuli available, a developing brain calculated that your face, your specific neural signal, was worth tuning to. What society calls weirdness. That caught breath, that urge to look away, that sense of being forensically examined by someone who hasn't learned to talk yet. Biology calls something entirely different. It calls it functional neural coupling. The baby was not judging you. The baby was not confused by you. The baby's brain identified yours as a signal worth synchronizing with, and launched the oldest biological program in human evolutionary history to close the gap between two nervous systems. Your discomfort was not a flaw. It was a 200,000-year-old alarm system confirming that the signal had been received. That beneath every social mask you have ever built, there exists a neural frequency still capable of being recognized by the most honest instrument on Earth, a brain that has not yet learned to lie. The implication of everything you have just heard is not that you need to fix how you respond to babies. It is that you need to understand what your response already proves. If the MIT research holds, and the data is unambiguous, then every second of contingent face-to-face interaction in the first 6 months of life directly accelerates the construction of the prefrontal cortex, the brain region that will eventually govern whether this child can regulate emotions, plan for the future, navigate complex social decisions, and resist impulsive destruction of their own well-being. That entire architecture is being assembled in real time, and the primary construction material is the face of whoever is staring back. Most people passively exist around babies. They hold them, feed them, change them, and occasionally smile at them. What they do not understand is that when a baby locks onto their face and they hold that gaze, genuinely hold it, without looking away, without reaching for their phone, without breaking the circuit, they are not simply being present. They are actively participating in the construction of another human being's mind. Their neural oscillations are serving as the scaffold. Their facial micro-expressions are teaching a limbic system how to read emotions. Their breathing rhythm is calibrating a vagal circuit that will determine how this child handles stress for the rest of their life. The baby chose your face. Among every visual stimulus in the room, the lights, the colors, the movement, the noise, a developing brain ran a computation older than civilization and concluded that your neural signal was the one worth tuning to. That is not a casual event. That is neural selection operating at the deepest level of biological significance. The baby did not stare at you because you were the closest object. It stared at you because its survival hardware identified your face as the most valuable signal available. And the only appropriate response to that level of biological trust is to stare back. Comment: I finally understand what the stare means. Because when that happens, when a baby reaches for your brain and you let it find you, You are not just connecting. You are joining a construction crew that has been building human consciousness since the first mother locked eyes with the first infant on the African savannah, and neither one looked away. Go back to the coffee shop. That baby who locked onto your face and didn't smile back. In that silence, in that unblinking focus, an event was unfolding that no one in the room understood except the two nervous systems involved. Her oscillatory frontal patterns were reaching for yours. The electrical rhythms of a brain that has existed for less than a year were attempting to entrain with the rhythms of a brain that has been running social computations for decades. Her mirror neurons, operating at raw, unfiltered bandwidth that no adult face can produce, were mapping your micro-expressions with forensic precision, not to judge them, but to learn them. Her ventral vagal circuit was calibrating her heart rate, her breathing, her facial muscle contractions against yours. In biological terms, her brain had identified your neural signal as an architectural template and launched the synchronization protocol our species has been running since the Pleistocene. And your brain responded. Not because you told it to, because it couldn't help it. The anterior cingulate registered the anomaly, a social signal carrying zero strategic intent, zero performative warmth, zero hidden agenda. Your mirror system activated at a depth you haven't experienced since childhood. Your vagal circuit engaged involuntarily. Pupils, breathing, the softening of muscles around your eyes that happens before conscious awareness even reaches the event. That tightness in your chest, that gravity, that impossible weight of being looked at by someone who has no reason to look at you, except that evolution itself instructed them to. That was not awkwardness. That was the most sincere neural compliment your brain has ever received. Another person's developing nervous system, running on nothing but evolutionary firmware and biological instinct, computed every face in the room and selected yours as the signal worth building a mind around. Not your clothes, not your behavior, not your social status. Your face, your neural pattern, the biological fingerprint of your consciousness. In a world that drowns in performative connection, curated photos, calculated vulnerability, optimized expressions designed to extract attention, a baby's stare is something that no longer exists anywhere else in adult social life. Completely honest neural communication. No algorithm mediating the signal. No filter distorting the intent. No strategic architecture between the sender and the receiver. Just one brain reaching for another in the way our species has done for 200,000 years. With the same urgency, the same precision, the same biological weight. Send this to someone who needs to understand that the way a baby looks at them is proof their nervous system still speaks the oldest language on Earth. Because in an era where authenticity is performed, measured, and monetized, where every social interaction passes through layers of calculation before it reaches the other person, there is one being on this planet who still looks at you with zero computation. One neural system that still trusts yours enough to use it as a blueprint. And the fact that you felt something when it happened, that involuntary catch, that inability to look away, means that beneath everything you have built to protect yourself, there is still a signal worth tuning to. Every piece of neural architecture you have encountered in this video points to one conclusion that the modern world is not equipped to accept. The most sophisticated social interface ever produced by evolution does not belong to an adult. It belongs to an infant. It is a pair of eyes that cannot read, cannot speak, cannot form a single conscious opinion about who you are or what you have done, yet can initiate a neurobiological event so precise that two separate nervous systems begin firing in synchrony within seconds of mutual gaze. Consider what that means, not sentimentally, mechanically. A brain that has been developing for 7 months. A brain that cannot hold a spoon, cannot recognize its own reflection, cannot distinguish between its hand and the hand of someone else, possesses the biological capacity to reach across the space between two skulls and synchronize its electrical oscillations with yours. That is not instinct in the way we casually use the word. That is an engineering feat that modern neuroscience is still struggling to fully map. And it happens every time a baby stares at a face and the face stares back. The society we have built does not make this easy. We live inside systems that train every neural circuit towards strategic output. Smiles that optimize for likability. Eye contact, calibrated for professional advantage. Vulnerability deployed as a persuasion tool. By the time you are 20, your social brain has been so thoroughly conditioned to perform that genuine, unfiltered expression becomes almost physiologically impossible. Every look you give carries computation. Every look you receive gets routed through a threat assessment pipeline before it reaches consciousness. You have become, neurologically speaking, the opposite of what a baby is. And then one stares at you, and the glass resonates despite itself. That is the final weight of the tuning fork metaphor. It was never just about the baby's gaze being pure. It was about the fact that your neural circuitry, layered under decades of strategic conditioning, relational disappointment, and protective dissociation, still vibrates when it encounters a signal that predates all of it. The resonance you feel is not weakness. It is not nostalgia. It is not sentimentality dressed as science. It is evidence, measurable, documented, physiologically verifiable evidence that the deepest layer of your neural architecture has not been destroyed by everything that was stacked on top of it. It has only been buried, and a baby found it. The baby was not trying to say something. It was doing something far more consequential. It was choosing. Among every visual signal in the room, a developing brain, operating on firmware that has been running unmodified for 200,000 years, selected your face as the template for its own neural construction. Not a screen, not a light, not the movement of a passing stranger. Your face, your signal. The oscillatory pattern generated by your specific consciousness, that is not a casual event. That is the most profound form of biological recognition another human being can offer. A newly forming mind looked at the electrical output of yours and concluded, this is what a brain should sound like. Build from this. The next time a baby stares at you and the world goes quiet, understand what that silence actually is. It is not empty. It is not awkward. It is the sound of a new mind choosing yours as its architect. And beneath every wall you have ever built to survive the noise of this world, there is a frequency that still answers, that still resonates, that still proves, in the only language biology has ever spoken, that you are worth the stare.